Welcome to Shelf Byte here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. Shelf Byte features spoiler-free book and audiobook reviews in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Tamara Ford, and if you'd like to chat with me about the book reviewed in this episode, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Shelf Addiction, as well as the Facebook group Shelf Addiction Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please support the podcast by sharing it with one book nerd friend or on your favorite social media space. That will really help me out, and I appreciate it. Let's jump into it. Today's audiobook title is Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky, narrated by Christine Lakin. Published on October 1st, 2019 by Grand Central Publishing and Hachette Audio, respectively. This horror title comes in at a hefty 720 pages, and the audiobook is 24 hours and 32 minutes. I understand that Chbosky is well known for Perks of Being a Wallflower that came out about 20 years ago, and it was well acclaimed and even had a movie adaptation. You should know that I've never read the book nor seen that movie, so I went into this title without any preconceived notions. From my point of view, this is a full-on adult title with serious horror thriller vibes. So let me tell you a little bit about the book. Imaginary Friend is about a young boy who vanishes in the woods, and when he returns, he's very different from when he went in. He couldn't recall what happened to him during those 6 days he was in the woods, but a nice man that no one has ever seen helped him find his way out of the woods. And this is where the story begins. First off, based on the title and the cover art, I expect this to be about an imaginary friend, right? Duh. But I think that's sort of misleading, actually. And I'll just leave that there. So yes, it's a little intrigue. Hopefully that's gotten you interested to see what exactly I'm talking about. The story was going one way, and then about 70% in, there was a pretty big change in the backbone of the plot. At first, it seemed like a question of mental illness. Then it seemed like a ghost story. But then it transformed into more like a fight between good and evil, light and dark. And it took on a pretty somber tone on top of the creep factor. At first, I wasn't sure if I liked the direction the book took, but when I finished it, I did. I thought it was pretty creative, and there's a moral tied into the story. So as I'm trying to keep it spoiler free, I'm not going to tell you exactly what the huge change was, but if you're reading or listening to or watching any of the early reviews, I'm sure it's really clear that this is a story of good versus evil. The characters were very interesting. The adults and kids alike are seriously experiencing character growth all over the place, and I like it. This was a long haul of a read, especially on audiobook, but I believe it was well done. The pacing was solid, and I never experienced a lull in the story. As things got more convoluted, the more I wanted to sort it out. I really enjoyed the audiobook narrator. Christine Lakin brought it and delivered with all of the different voices, from the young kids to the old men and women to the supernatural creatures and everything in between. I was there for it. I think you would enjoy this story if you also liked the vibe of Channel Zero on Sci-Fi, which is now canceled, by the way. You know, it kind of had that creepypasta feel, especially season 1 of Channel Zero. So if you are familiar with that even a little bit, I think you'll feel the vibe of this story. Or even if you enjoy a good versus evil story with definitely serious themes as well as some really scary moments, I think this would be a solid choice. I rated Imaginary Friend 4 out of 5 bookmarks. I'm always on the hunt for a legit horror story or even a really intense thriller. And let me tell you, those are hard to come by nowadays. Chbosky delivered what I was looking for, and the book ended in a way that was satisfying to me, which is exactly what I'd hoped for with a book of this type. So I'm going to end things there. If you were lucky enough to get your hands on an early copy, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Imaginary Friend. If you're listening to this review in the future, tell me what you think of it as well. Thanks for listening, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode. And until next time, happy reading. Take care, everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by the Shelf Addiction merch store. Check out all the bookish t-shirts, notebooks, mugs, and more. Don't miss out on these original designs, perfect for any book nerd. Support the podcast and visit shelfaddiction.com/merch and pick up your next favorite bookish item.